So I have the new global agenda, which is basically saying that because of our changing global environment, we've been forced to reevaluate our policies. So my first point was the changing role of military power. So economically, we now have sanctions, which are non-military penalties imposed on a foreign nation in an attempt to modify its behavior. So something like trade embargoes would be an example of that, and this doesn't require military involvement. Utility-wise, we're losing our function in solving international issues because stuff like economic conflicts don't respond to force and nuclear weapons, so we no longer have need for military involvement. And thirdly, we've also come to the conclusion of soft power, which is the ability of a country to persuade others to do what it wants without force or coercion, which once again does not require military involvement. My second point was nuclear proliferation. The spread of technology has enabled the creation of nuclear weapons and the missiles to deliver them. So United States policymakers have sought to halt the spread of nuclear weapons by signing the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1968, which basically means that none of us are going to be testing nuclear weapons. We're most concerned about countries like North Korea and Iran who have made expressly threats to us, and others labeled in blue and purple on this chart here. This leads right into terrorism. Modernly, we like to deal with, well, we are most known for dealing with ISIL right now, so that's their sign. My fourth point was international economy. So right now we practice interdependency, which is a mutual reliance in which actions reverberate and affect other people's economic lifelines. So health of the American economy, for example, depends increasingly on the prosperity of our trading partners, so like Russia, China, Germany, Great Britain, India, Pakistan, etc. So the decline of currency and debt from other countries, as well as the declining economic situations, affects all of us. Steps in place to fix this were the International Monetary Fund, which is a cooperative international organization of 185 countries intended to stabilize the currency via giving loans. My fifth point is international trade. So it's grown rapidly over the last decade, and American exports have increased 20-fold. The globalization of finances has been even more dramatic than the growth of trade, which is interesting. This how we would deal with this was tariffs, but which was the main instrument of international economic policy, and a special tax added to imported goods to raise the price, which would protect American business. But since the Great Depression, we haven't really used tariffs because we found out that high tariffs just result in more high tariffs, and non-tariff barriers, which were tried to resolve the high tariffs, didn't really work. So now we use trade agreements. A famous one is NAFTA, which is the North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada and Mexico, which would eventually eliminate all or most of all the tariffs in the North American countries. A more widely known one by everyone in the world is GATT, which is the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which is the mechanism by which most of the world nations negotiate widespread trade agreements. This led to the World Trade Organization, or the WTO as some people call them, and they would act as an arbiter of international trade disputes. So there's their symbol. The balance of trade was my last point. It's the ratio of what is paid for imports to what is earned from exports. So when we've imported more than we've exported, there's a balance of trade deficit. Right now we're at 726 billion, which is a big number. So basically, America wants us to keep up the foreign markets, but we lack the influence to do so. Because if we refuse to trade with another nation, then that nation will just deny our exports access to its markets, and then United States consumers will lose access to the product. That's basically how balance of trade comes into effect there. In addition to that, or the opposite rather, we have excess of imports over exports, which decreases the dollar's value. And when you decrease the dollar value, you do see a rise in exports, but it also exacerbates unemployment because we're outsourcing our labor to find cheaper sources of labor, and this leads to thousands of jobs being lost each year from foreign competition. And that's it. Thank you for listening.